The snowfall music, that evening, walking home from work, was like entering a winter picture. The fields surrounding the cottage in East Moor, transforming the surroundings into serene white drifts. Warm and comfortable, the porch light peeked through the falling flakes. On the icy steps, my boots crunched, and when I grabbed the door, I can still picture how wonderful it would be to see my family gathered inside and fall into the coziness of home. However, the air felt strange as soon as the door snapped shut behind me, held like the house itself was holding its breath. It was not silent. On their hooks, coats hung neatly. In the living, the fire crackled. Everything appeared to be normal, but I felt an odd weight. I entered the kitchen and came to a halt. Beside the table, a man I had never seen before held an axe from our own shed. The blade had dirt spakes and was nicked. The handle appeared nearly too tiny in his grasp. With pale features, my parents sat rigidly opposite from him, their eyes flashing to mine and issuing a scared warning. Our daughter was seated near the end of the table, her 10-year-old fingers clenched onto the chair's arms as her legs shook. The man turned, his countenance eerily serene. "Evening," he uttered those words. I felt sick to my stomach because of the flat, almost conversational tone of his voice. "Billy is his name. He broke out of prison today. I need us somewhere to stay. Follow my instructions exactly, so that no one is harmed." I was having trouble breathing, but I gave a nod. "Anything to keep my daughter safe." "Okay," I said. "We'll stay out of trouble." Until my husband returned home an hour later. He forced us to sit in tense silence while we listened to the wind howling outside. Billy lunged as soon as he entered and grabbed me by thumb and pulling me to my feet. The icy edge of a knife sprang out of his pocket and touched my throat. "Tie them up," he commanded, pushing cords in my husband's direction. "All of them tight." My husband obeyed, his hands trembling. His voice cracked as he attempted to reassure himself in a whisper. "Everything will be all right." We were hauled into different rooms that night, and each one felt like a dark box with walls closing in. "Just keep your cool." My mother wailed somewhere behind a closed door, and I heard screaming from my father's chamber, harsh hits, and a stifled cry. Sarah's voice, tiny and scared, I pleaded through the wood grain of my door, "Please, please stop," until Billy yelled at her to stop, echoing down the corridor. However, all I could hear was his low, hilarious chuckle. Billy was standing behind me with the knife when workers suddenly arrived the following morning to inspect the septic tank. His lips brushed my ear as he crushed against my back, hissing, "Smile, send them away. One wrong move and your little girl dies first." The workmen left with a cheery wave, not realizing how near they had been to 5 terrified captives, even though my hands were clearly shaking. Afterwards, he thrust a list into my hands that said, "Drive into town. Don't talk to newspapers, cigarettes, or matches. I still have your family. A soul beyond purchasing these. I'll know if you try something." The radio crackled as I drove away. Weather warnings, icy roads, deepening snow. Every instinct in my body cried out for me to run to the police, jump into someone's arms, and plead for assistance. But every time I thought of opening my mouth, I recalled Sarah's scared little face. So I bought what he requested and drove back, my pulse racing the whole time. He made us sit at the table and play cards as though we were guests at some strange dinner party. And when I got back, he was almost happy, agitated, pacing, and frantic. My mother's eyes were crimson with tears. My husband was staring at the wall rather than his cards, and the fire burst loudly in the stillness. "Where's Sarah?" "Sleeping," he replied, dealing another hand. "Kids sleep a lot," when I eventually queried in a shaky voice. By the third day, a storm had covered the cabin with a thick layer of snow, and Billy paced from window to window, but the flash in his eyes wasn't right. His hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from agitation, and he was muttering about money, needing a car, and being stuck. The air felt electrified, danger tightening its grip every hour. "You two, come with me," he said, pushing us in the direction of the door that afternoon. "We require materials." He gestured to my spouse, and my husband said in a whisper at a town stoplight, We should tell the cop. The others stayed. No funny business. He's there. I could see safety a little distance away and the cop parked across the street. But all I could visualize was he'll kill them, I said, shaking my head at Sarah's expression. We are unable to. When we got back, we're leaving, Billy murmured, fumbling with the keys as he hauled me back outside after retiring my husband. Snow pounded the windscreen, but halfway down the road, he abruptly turned around. No, he whispered, no loose ends. As we entered the driveway, I heard the first back door slammed with a smash, and my mother screamed, high and urgent, followed by my husband's voice, shouting, struggling, pleading. After then, there was stillness. I yelled from inside the car and pounded on the windows, but he kept them closed. When the neighbors heard the commotion, they fled the home and called the police. Reached the porch. By the time the police arrived, my father and daughter had been killed on the first night. Billy left with me in the car, crashing, and my mother and husband killed trying to fend him off in those final moments, something he had concealed behind his composed speech and fake grins. A mile down the ice road, he crashed into a ditch and stole another car, dragging me along in a final desperate attempt to flee, while sirens reverberated through the snowstorm. He took the axe from the back when the police surrounded us close to the edge of the woods during the last confrontation, which took place in a dazzling blur of lights and snow. Seat, pulling me out while pressing it to my neck, saying, "Your time is up." He raised it aloft and yelled. A single Billy slumped, the axe slid from his hands, and he plummeted into the freezing air as the police charged in. At last, the snow and everything disappeared. Still, I made it through. My relatives didn't. The cottage is now empty and silent, enveloped in snow all year long in my recollection. All year long in my recollection. Tracks my friend Dave, and I decided that summer was the ideal time to spend some time disappearing into the Utah mountains. We discovered this historic cabin on the internet, one of those locations that nestled miles down gravel roads that wind through vast meadows and trees. It hardly appears on a map. The listing sounded ideal because it promised complete seclusion. No phones buzzing, no traffic, there are no obligations at the door. The most of the day was spent on the road. The sun was setting and creating dusty orange streaks in the sky by the time we drove off the final paved road. As we ascended farther into the mountains, our truck rattled and we bounced along uneven terrain. The cabin looked just like the pictures when it was eventually visible. Sunlight and rain have turned the hand-built wooden walls grey. A small porch with an unevenly rising stone chimney on one side. Up until that initial moment, it appeared lonely in a way that felt serene. Climbed onto the porch, as stated by the owner. The key was located beneath the carpet. However, something in my stomach constricted as I pushed the door open. It appeared as though the latch had not caught correctly, been completely closed. The scent of old smoke and chilly air wafted out. In the entryway, I hesitated. "Do you believe animals got in, Dave?" I inquired. He shrugged and dragged his duffel inside. "It's probably just the wind. These locations are constantly changing." However, even he sounded not sure. We strolled around the small space. A kitchen with outdated appliances, a bathroom that is just large enough to turn around in, and to tiny bedrooms with creaking metal bunks. Before I opened a closet in search of a pot, everything appeared to be normal. Behind the dishes were a few food cans that we most surely did not bring. Half dead, one of them was a sharp metal edge where it had been forced open by someone. "Strange," I muttered. Dave leaned on my shoulder. Most likely, the previous tenants overlooked it. He made an effort to ignore it. "Man, hurry up. I'm going hungry. Let's simply have a decent meal," we hurled before the light went down. We hastily ate some sandwiches together, gathered our equipment, and headed down to the creek to go fishing. Rushing over polished stones, the water was chilly and clear. We managed to capture a few trout-made jokes and like nothing was out of the ordinary. However, the woods were eerily quiet by nightfall when we came back and made a fire inside the cottage. We engaged in card games at the small table, initially giggling. Occasionally, though, my ears would tune into the eerie quiet outside, as if the forest were holding its breath. I stayed awake longer after we eventually went to bed. I listened to every creak of the flooring and every blow of wind against the walls, more than I wanted to acknowledge. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I recall of waking up suddenly to the sound of a single hefty thump outside. Step. I refrained from breathing. Once more, there it was. A methodical, gradual crunch of soil. Dave, I muttered. Yes. He had a drowsy voice. Have you heard that? He hesitated. Most likely a deer. Return to your sleep. It didn't feel like a deer, though. It had a human-like quality. Close. Grey light began to trickle through in the morning. The drapes and the powerful coffee scent. I went outside to the porch to get some fresh air while Dave prepared eggs. I noticed it at that point. A distinct, deep, and crisp bootprint in the soft mud, larger than any of ours, and fresh. It was pointing directly at the porch. A chill went up my spine. Come on over here, Dave. He came with me. His jaw stiffened as he knelt down and examined it. Perhaps the owner didn't have a truck and didn't say anything. The uneasiness persisted even though we couldn't find anything else in the cabin. In an attempt to clear our minds, we hiked the trail behind the cabin. We discovered a clearing concealed by dense vegetation about a mile in. Trash was strewn all over a food wrappers, food crumbs, a rusty can opener, and a tiny homemade nest. The brand of the partially empty can in our cabinet matched that of a few of the wrappers. I remarked, Dave, someone's living out here. He gave the mess a little kick. Looks new. I don't want to encounter drifters, poachers, or anyone else. The tranquility of the woods was vanished. The shadows were heavier, and the trees seemed tighter. That afternoon, we went fishing once more, but my gaze kept going to the tree line, anticipating any activity. In an attempt to maintain normalcy, we would cook trout over a small fire pit for dinner. Dave made a joke. Even Bigfoot didn't smile after it exited his mouth. However, it's possible that he left that footprint. That evening, we locked the door despite the latch seldom held. As darkness engulfed the windows, the fire crackled softly. Thicker than before, the silence closed in. Then, shortly after 10 o'clock, something scraped the outer wooden wall. Like fingertips, a slow drag. I froze. Dave glanced up sharply. A tall, human-shaped shadow passed through the window and vanished as quickly as it appeared. I stood up and murmured, Dave, someone is out there. Flashlights, he remarked in a strained voice. With trembling hands, I grasped it and polished it via the glass. All that responded were trees. To improve our vision, we turned off the lights inside. Outside, the night was dark and unending. The quiet was broken by a whistle, low, purposeful, not a creature. Who the hell is that? Dave whispered. Slow, testing footsteps crunched the leaves as they circled the cabin. They paused at the rear entrance. Metal tapped metals. The handle jerked. My heart crashed into my ribs. I pounded the wall and yelled, You are visible to us. Leave this place. Everything fell silent. Then retreating footsteps that vanished into the forest. We're leaving at first light, Dave remarked in a pallid tone. If we lose the deposit, it doesn't matter to me. Sleep wasn't a choice. With a kitchen knife resting on my lap, I sat in the chair facing the door and listened to the fire burn low. A new sound, scraping, began at 3 in the morning. Not outside, the crawl space beneath us, beneath the hut. Something larger than an animal was moving, he muttered. We stomp. Both of us banged our heels into the planks of wood. The sound abruptly stopped. The information was bad, but we didn't hear anything more. Whoever had been out there was aware the layout, the crawl space, and the cabin, and he hadn't permanently left. We silently threw our equipment into the truck at first dawn. I sensed that people were watching us the whole time. Prior to entering I noticed a glimmer of activity in the trees from the passenger seat. A slight but distinct sparkle. Binoculars. Go immediately, Dave. We tore up the dirt after he slammed the gas. Road, dust flying in our wake. We saw a sheriff's truck traveling up the same road a few miles later. We told him everything while waving him down. Noises, trash, footprints, and someone attempting the door. The sheriff didn't appear shocked. Are you guys still residing in Reynolds, Iron County? He inquired. We gave a nod. He let out a sigh. 4 years. We have been pursuing a man out here. Refers to himself as a mountain man, steals food, breaks into cabins, observes individuals. He's usually armed and deadly. You're fortunate that he didn't force his way inside. Now that civilization had returned, the air felt safe once more as we drove away trembling. Was seen. I read about him later that week. A survivalist ghost. In the Utah Mountains, Troy James Knapp is wanted for armed conflicts, property damage, and burglaries. Shortly after our vacation, they apprehended him during a snow-covered standoff. However, it still makes me uneasy to know that he was out there that evening, circling our cabin, testing the doors, and creeping beneath the floor, my blood vessels. We weren't by ourselves, not even near. And if we had stayed one more, I doubt we would have departed at night. Not at all, not at all. Hidden away, a huge bang that shook the whole house awakened me up. It was too late, and I was wrapped up in my blankets at the age of 13, still half asleep. My dog, Molly, growled through the darkness as she barked like a crazy person from downstairs corridors. As I listened, my chest constricted. Then there were additional sounds, a harsh, irate voice yelling outside, slicing into the darkness. With a torch in hand, my dad made his way to the door, the beam slicing a tiny line through the shadows. "Show me your badge," he yelled, tight but firm. He was met with silence. There was another bang. Fear gripped me as I hurried out of bed, feet cold on the floor, and ran to my parents' room. As the sound became louder, rattling the windows and sending dust motes dancing in the glare of the torch, my mother was up already, her eyes wide and agitated. She said, "Come here, sweetie," and drew me in. We gathered together, locked the bathroom door. She dialed 911, her fingers shaking. She said, "Someone's trying to get into the phone." My heart pounded so loudly, I thought it would drown out her voice. The front door began to shatter as the banging intensified. Under repeated assaults. Angry, the man yelled. In response, my father shouted, "What do you want?" The air was broken by a gunshot. I clung to my mother as I gasped. She gave me a closer hug. "Don't worry, Jamie. Keep quiet." However, it wasn't acceptable. A bulky the sound of footsteps echoed up the stairs. They were within. I was trembling so much that my mother put her finger to her lips. I was having trouble breathing. With doors creaking open, the man checked each chamber. Upon arriving at ours, the handle rattled. He snarled, "Open up. Quiet." After that, he repeatedly kicked the door until it eventually burst open. He was a stranger standing there with a rifle in his hand and a mask on. My mother moved ahead of me. "Don't harm us, please. Go with what you want." He simply pointed the rifle without saying anything. Then he took black tape out of his pocket and bound my wrist and ankles so firmly that I screamed. I whimpered, "Mom." He fired when she attempted to shove him back. With blood gathering under her, my mother dropped. He was dragged me down the stairs, each step hitting my bare feet. My father lay still next to the entrance. Outside, his car's trunk yawned open. The engine groaned as he pushed me inside. The chilly metal against me, sirens wailing in the distance. It faded as he drove off. My wrists were burning. I felt a knot of fear in my stomach, and I questioned whether I would ever be discovered. The automobile finally came to a stop. He dragged me into a pitch-black jungle. A lone cabin was concealed among the trees that towered like silent eons. "This is your new home," he remarked bluntly, severing the tape from my ankles while maintaining my tied by the hands. The cabin's interior smelt of neglect and mildew. I donned the big pajamas he gave me because there was nothing I could do. Try to run and bad things will happen, he said. Out here, nobody will listen to you. I lay awake on the bed he indicated that first night, with every sound in the cabin accentuated by the darkness. He rested in the I was snoring softly in the same room, and I felt like any shadow could jump at me. My parents' voices and smiles, now muffled by him, came to mind. The pillow was drenched in tears, but I said nothing because I was terrified of sound. Days became hazy. He occasionally went on errands, not at all at other times. When he finally left, he pushed me beneath his bed and surrounded me with weights and boxes. Don't move, he cautioned. I writhed in the dark 4 hours, trying to breathe and urinate. Outside, cars drove by, birds sang, and nobody showed up. He forced me to assist with household tasks and prepare meals, while keeping a close eye on me. Cut them, he would command, knife in hand, his eyes lifeless and icy. Once, I asked why he'd taken me. With his fork in midair, he hesitated. One day, I noticed you on the school bus. I was aware that I want you. A cold crawled through me, down my back. Silence enveloped the holidays. He departed at Christmas, carrying boxes that were heavier than previously. As the wind rattled the trees outside, I lay beneath the bed, wondering if anyone was aware that I was still alive. I jumped at every sound. The shadows themselves, the creatures in the forest, the creaking floorboards. He held my arm tightly, while allowing me to go outdoors once or twice. He muttered, "If anyone sees you, I'll kill them, too." I trusted him. Like water filling a bottle, fear swelled steadily. I wondered every day if this would be the day he lost it, if I will ever get to see my family again. Then he departed one January day. He said, stacking weights under the bed. His engine died. My chest tighter, this time with a glimmer of hope rather than fear. Sweat pounded on my brow as I pushed the crates inch by inch. Anguish burned in my arms, but at last there was a space. With my knees wobbly and my heart racing, I slipped out. There was nobody in the cabin. The woods tore at my skin. I grabbed his trainers near the entrance and raced into the chilly night. My face was ripped by branches. The leaves are slippery underfoot. I wandered onto a road. A dog-walking woman froze, her eyes widening. She said, "Are you James?" With tears in my eyes, I nodded. He took me. "Please assist." She escorted me to her neighbor's house, wrapped me in her coat, and dialed 911. I informed them about my parents and mumbled Jake's name. Sirens and flashing lights after a few minutes. He was seen admitting everything while driving silently in the vicinity. I currently reside with my aunt. Still loud noises make me leap, but I'm more powerful. I managed to survive despite the cabin's attempts to break me. Dreams recreate the memories, yet I am aware of one thing. Help can find you even in the most dire circumstances. Even in the most dire circumstances. The night evil our modest wooden home was located in a rural area close to Orch, Oklahoma. It stood by himself on a vast expanse of land with no neighbors nearby to hear anything, surrounded by fields that waved in the breeze. My father was the town's pastor, who is patient, compassionate, and constantly willing to assist others. My 16-year-old older brother, Brooks, and I were looked after by my mother, who also managed the household, school, chores, family dinners, routine, safety, and predictability were all part of a basic, stable life. October 15th, 1979, began like any other evening. The smell of Mom's prepared fried chicken and mashed potatoes filled the kitchen and permeated the living room. We gathered around the table, chatting about school and laughing. "How was football practice today?" said Brooks' father, with pride in his voice. Brooks grinned. "Excellent. I'm getting faster," the coach says. I gave my plate a shove. "Today in art class, I drew something. Do you want to see it?" Mom grinned. Sweetheart, after supper, everything felt normal and secure with the sound of cutlery clattering and the warmth of the bulb over us. Then there was a knock on the door, sharp and hard. My stomach dropped. Dad with a troubled brow. He stood up and looked out the window. There were two men standing there, a shorter man with a disheveled beard and a tall, dark-haired man. The tall one had a firearm in his hand. The shorter one carried a handgun. The towering man shoved the door open and barked, "This is a robbery." Everyone lies face down on the ground, calm but tense. Dad held out his hands. "Please take what you wish, but don't harm my family. Quit talking and follow our instructions." With a snap, the short one pressed the pistol to his side. We clambered onto the rug in the living room. The tall one shackled our hands and feet with rope. His moves were coldly efficient. He insisted, "Where's the money?" Dad gestured to a drawer in the kitchen. After searching through it, the short one came back holding several bills. The tall man snarled, "That's all." "You're lying." Mom's voice trembled as she whispered, "That's all, I swear." The men destroyed cupboards and drawers as they tore through the house, hurling possessions on the ground. Like a heavy blanket, fear descended upon me. The tall man's gaze then met mine. "You come with me," he said. I glanced at Dad in terror as he roughly pulled me up. "No, please go. Her by herself." The shorter one aimed the gun at him. "Keep quiet or I'll start shooting." He pulled me into the bedroom at the rear. I don't want to describe everything that took place there. It was terrible and gloomy. I silently sobbed, fervently hoping that parents were secure. After everything was over, he shackled my feet once more and brought me back to the living room. As if nothing had happened, the men sat at our table and ate the leftover chicken. The short one replied, "This is good," crunching a drumstick. The tall one chuckled, "Better than jail food." Their dialogue with strained tones. They turned to leave town. The tall one muttered, "We can't leave witnesses." "Then, do it," the brief one answered. The tall one raised the weapon, and I froze. "I apologize," he stated in a detached and impersonal manner. Bang. There was a red splatter on the floor as Dad fell. "Richard," yelled Mom. Bang. Next, she crumbled. With a moan, Brooks was shot twice in the back. 2 gunshots tore through me, causing excruciating pain. With blood in my mouth, I lay motionless and wished that everything would stop. Then there was quiet. Harshly, Brooks whispered, "Are you all right, Leslie?" "It hurts," I muttered back. Dad was able to pass out. "Love you, kids." Before leaving still, Brooks used his teeth to loosen the ropes as he wriggled his hands free out of sheer willpower. He untied me. "We have to get help," he declared. We staggered to our feet, crawled to Dad, and whispered our love one final time. Trembling and covered in blood, I reached into the kitchen for a knife to cut the last of the ropes. Brooks ignored the suffering in his own automobile and stepped behind the wheel. "Body, hold on, Leslie," he said, holding the wheel firmly. We traveled to a friend's place via car throughout the night. Their eyes widened in disbelief when the door opened. "Call the ambulance." At the hospital, doctors, someone yelled, "Worked to keep us alive." When police showed up, they asked inquiries. I explained the 2 men, the short one with the black hair, the tall one with a beard. The yellow automobile outside was mentioned by Brooks. "Chevy Malibu," he stated. The men were swiftly apprehended. That automobile had been seen by witnesses during another heist. They worked in an oil field where their path led. Stephen Hatch and Glenn Ock are their names. They had escaped, killing 2 more individuals, while committing more atrocities in Colorado and Texas. A captive in Colorado was duped after tricking them into consuming tainted beer. They fled and contacted the authorities. The men were eventually captured 6 weeks later. They admitted. Glenn acknowledged carrying out the shootings. Stephen helped him. Both had used drugs and been intoxicated. Over time, sentences changed. In 2011, Glenn passed away while incarcerated. Stephen as well following the modification of his sentence. I grew up with Brooks. He started practicing law. Eventually, he became a senator and worked to defend victims. Years later, he confronted Glenn in jail and found forgiveness in order to heal himself. I started working as a teacher, created a family and persisted. We didn't forget. I learnt that night that both wickedness and the ability to endure it. There was a time when our house felt secure. A time when our house felt secure.